Alright guys, well, I tried to do a video last night, but I don't know, it's weird. Like lately I've been having really bad fatigue issues. I'm sleeping like all day, every day. I don't know what's wrong with me. I think I'm gonna go get some blood tests done. You know, I was having problems with my Hep C, I don't know, like 6 months ago. And I went to go get liver biopsy done and everything, and they were telling me my viral load was like going up. It's about time that I get that addressed. And I know that like when I've had Hep C for like 20 years. I think that's what the culprit is. So I'm getting like really bad fatigue, and then I would like try to start recording and I look narcoleptic, or that I was like on heroin or something, because I'd like start trying to do a story and then I would just like start nodding out, and I was like, wow, this is a bad look all the way around. So, you know, I got like a good night's sleep for once, and here we are, the last day of the month. So today, this evening, we're gonna do the sponsor raffle. I'm gonna fly out, I'm gonna see somebody on that tier. And I'm gonna try to do it live, but if I can't get to a place where Wi-Fi is better, then I guess we'll just record it. I'll have Karina record, I'll make up, I think I have 11 sponsors. And I'll write everybody's name down on a list, I'll put it in a hat, just like I would any other raffle. But we're doing it tonight. It's the last day of the month. I'm gonna try to get a few videos up today. But this one's gonna be for all tiers. This is gonna be another prison story. And yeah, this is first thing in the morning. I rarely do videos first thing in the morning. And here we are. It's like, I don't know what time it is right now, like 7. I know Nico's watching Sesame Street right now, so it must be early. Anyway, let's get on with the story. A lot of things were happening last time when we had this cliffhanger. A new busload of people had come in to Centinella. So I'm still in orientation. I've been in orientation for a while now. And it looked like, I don't know, it felt like I was going to be there forever at that point. My cellie found out that he was a 2-5er, which is like a PC gang member. And I don't want to be involved with any of that shit. You know, as somebody that has been GP my entire life, I was on my 3rd term. I wasn't happy being around SNY people to begin with. You know, the one thing that I had going for me at this particular place is that you couldn't be around sex offenders. Even though I thought my cellie probably was a non-caught sex offender, just based on some of the creepy shit that he would say. It's like, yeah, slapped a bitch in the face without her consent with my dick. I'm like, oh, that's like pretty much a sex crime. He's like, not if you don't get caught. I'm like, oh, sex offender humor? Right on, bro. He's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I'm being sarcastic. You're a piece of shit. And he's like, whoa, 2-5. I'm like, all right. And I was just starting to hear about how these different PC gangs work. So I wasn't happy about that to begin with. Then this new busload full of people come in and basically get a kite saying that this is the time. Like, the numbers for the SNY side had increased substantially since I'd been at this place. And it was kind of, you know, a threatening kite saying, if you're not with us, then you're against us. And, you know, you're going to be taken care of accordingly. So I had to like choose sides, and they wanted me to take somebody out that had gotten there, that was like on the new GP influx of people. Again, interesting dynamic, because I definitely didn't consider myself on that side. But the longer that I was at this place, I've been there months now at this point, everybody that was there is considered SNY now. So it's just a really weird situation to be in, because I just had a kid and I wanted to go home. And part of the reason that I was just kind of not making any turbulence and just kind of putting my blinders on and trying to walk a certain straight line was because I wanted to go home to my kid. But now I'm in an even weirder situation, because they're basically saying that I'm forced to participate in the PC gang stuff. And I don't even know, you know, I'm not even sure at this point how SNY gangs work, you know. from what little I know about PC gangs, they'll basically take anybody. You just can't be solid. Like, whoa, hey, isn't Leone solid? Yeah, well, he can't be in this gang. Only pieces of shit. So that was like the one thing. It's like you had people that had debriefed, you had people that had rolled it up over debts. No sex offenders. I'm pretty sure that even that is looked down upon on the SNY gang side, but I'm not really sure. Like, I wasn't around them long enough, and I didn't ask. It's not like you get a Q&A, you know, where you're like, hey, man, sex offenders cool? I'm asking for my Sally Chubb. He's like, hey, well, are you guys cool with sex offenders? They're like, no, we're not. You know, it's not like you had press conferences like that with the PCs. So there was like all that going. And then when this new busload comes in, I see another one of those kids that had jumped me when I was at Santa Barbara County Jail. It seemed to be like a reoccurring theme while I was on that term. And I mean, that's just how it is when you're in prison. You know, it's a pretty small community of people. You know, there's only a handful of people like myself that still have a full set of teeth. You know, it's mostly like toothless, you know, from the carny persuasion of people. And, you know, they're like white power, but they wear FUBU gear when they're in the free world. You know, they wear like FUBU windbreakers. Like, yeah, I hate black people. Right, well, isn't that like made by black people, for us, by us? No! It's for white people. All right. That's kind of how I always looked at people that are white power like that. I've never been a fan. So when this new busload full of people comes in, I see that there's one of these kids. Now, this isn't the kid that I'd already kicked in the face. This is another one. I mean, there was about 12 of them from that initial incident. I didn't realize that any of them were going on to state prison, but, you know, I guess that who knows what had happened to this guy. It's not like we had time to like catch up and figure out what had happened to him. But I saw him, and my whole mentality was, again, like a reoccurring thing in prison is a lot of times you engage in violence because you know that it's really the only option you have. It's like either you go along with what these people are saying and risk doing more time, or you're risking your own safety, because people will get you when you're locked up like that, you know, eventually, especially when there's like sides being picked. And like, you know, it's not like I was going to get accepted by the GP guys that I didn't even know yet. And then I was thinking about, you know, like those skinheads from the first riot, or the second riot that I was in when I had chow with them. I was thinking, like, those guys are older. They don't give a fuck. They just want to go home to their kids as well. You know, a lot of people do have families and they just want to go home. So I'm like, well, what's going to happen to those guys? But once I saw the kid that was part of the people that had jumped me, I'm like, okay, you know, if I have to take out somebody, at least let me take out somebody that had done something wrong to me. At least it's not just some random person. So that was kind of the plan. And then it was supposed to go down that dinner. So bus came in the night before. There was going to be breakfast. Of course, some people were going to get off because that's just the nature of how things were. People that are in general population going there on the bus know that they're getting put on a mixed yard and they want to get off, you know? Like, fuck going home to my kids and my chick. I'm going to stay here with dudes. This shit's way cooler. You know, maybe I can listen to AM, FM radio in my cell. Stay here the rest of my life. I mean, that's seriously like the choice that people made. You know, be loyal to this world didn't really make sense to me. But anyway, next morning comes along, and as you know, I don't go to breakfast. I have to go to dinner that night because that's like kind of where the line in the sand is drawn. Like, I have to go to dinner the next day. And sure enough, right as they leave, siren goes off. Around that time, the goon squad comes and they start hitting cells. Now remember, my cellie has a knife in the mattress. I only knew that from the day before. I remember he was like doing like somersault, like stab moves. Like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna just dive on the floor, do a somersault, and do a stabbing motion. I'm like, if you do that, you're probably gonna get murdered, dude. You know, I'm going to see you doing a somersault and just stomp on your fucking head like it's a grape or something. So they end up going. Goon Squad's hitting, which is very typical, as I'd mentioned in the last video, because the holiday season was going on. So they know, the cops know that there's a high probability that people are making alcohol during the holidays. For multiple reasons. It's depressing, it's festive, whatever the reasoning is. They just know that there's a higher probability that there's going to be alcohol during that particular time. So when I see them doing it, I drink like 5 or 6 of these tumbler Folger things full of Pruno. And by the time they get to my cell, they smell it. I get handcuffed. They're taking me to medical to breathalyze me. Now, I'm more worried about the knife in the mattress. I'm relatively new to the state system, but just from the experience of doing Fed time, I know that they trip on knives. For good reasons. That's one of the very few rules, that and alcohol, where I kind of understand where they're coming from. It's like people get drunk, they get violent. People get drunk, violent, they have a makeshift shank, they're going to probably stab somebody with them, And I've seen crazy shit happen over alcohol and makeshift prison knives and, people get drunk and they get stupid just like they do in the free world. It's the same kind of shit. It's almost even worse when you're in prison because you're around a bunch of really, really ignorant people, that they don't even care. They have no concept of restraint. It's you're usually in prison with the kind of people where they're at a mall and they're like, damn, that TV looks bomb. Well, it's $900, Ed. I don't think we can afford it. A normal person would be like, okay, maybe we'll save up. Maybe I'll see a coupon in the Sunday paper and then I can apply that coupon and I can get that $900 TV for $860 or whatever. And they save up and they get it. And it's they take one of those corny pictures where it's them with their wife, holding their new TV and they post it on social media. It's a normal person. A convict or a criminal, someone that has antisocial behavioral disorder, will see that TV and they'll be like, damn, that TV is bomb. Well, Ed, you can't afford it. You literally don't even have an apartment or anything. You live with your mom. Fuck that! And they just take the TV and they run out and trip and the security guards get them and then they go to prison. They're like, dude, I don't know. System's just totally unfair, man. It's aimed at keeping me locked up. I don't get it. You run into a lot of people like that. So you mix alcohol with people that already have that mentality and it's usually a bad thing, right? So they end up taking me to the infirmary and they want to breathalyze me. Now, when I get to the infirmary, I already explained this. It's an indoor gymnasium that's been turned into this makeshift medical center. There's cubicles. There's nurses that sit at desks and there's foldable metallic chairs that they sit the inmates down. They sit me down. I have my hands handcuffed behind my back and I see somebody brought in and it's Chubbs. Now, when I'd been walking over to the medical center place, I'd seen everybody on the yard laying on their stomach, zip tied. So obviously a riot had popped off. I already knew that just because of the situation that we were in and the siren went off. But when Chubbs came in, he's covered in blood. And he's just kind of looking at me, shaking his head. Now, I'm sitting down in this chair. I have my hands handcuffed behind my back. And there's a cop on each side of him. There's a cop sitting with me and they're about to breathalyze me. I'm like, hey man, what happened? He's like, it's all bad. And they're like, hey, shut up. He's puts his head down and he's leaking bad. Blood's literally dripping onto the floor. And while he's sitting there, they're about to stitch him up. He's handcuffed or whatever. And a nurse comes up and she starts stitching him. These 2 cops that are guarding him are just kind of standing over him. He's probably 10 feet away from me. And I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for the nurse to bring me the breathalyzer machine or whatever. Then all of a sudden, all the cops, except for one of them. So there were 2 with him. There was 1 with me. There was a nurse. The nurse stays. The cop that was with me stays. The 2 cops that were with him, they all run outside. Obviously something had happened out there. And things like that happen in prison sometimes. Like, you'll be right about to get breathalyzed or something's about to happen and then something worse will happen, so they get preoccupied. So I'm sitting in there and I'm just watching the cop kind of, hold Chubbs while a nurse comes and she starts giving him stitches. He got cut right here. And finally, I'm like, can I talk to my cellie? And they're like, yeah, go ahead. So I'm like, hey man, this is probably about, I don't know, an hour and a half later. So something clearly had gone on outside on the yard. Even though everybody was already on their stomachs and they were already zip tied, something beyond that had happened. Who knows what? Finally, they let me talk to my cellie. And I was like, hey man, what happened? And he said that something had popped off in the chow hall. He's telling me in like minimal language because there's a cop right there, so he can't like really spell it out for me. Basically, he's saying that like, the typical stuff that we were used to in the chow hall happened. But it didn't look typical because so many people, it looked like the first riot that we were in, that really bad one. And that's about all he said. It's all the cop would let me say back and forth to each other. So, he got stitched up. He's sitting there. They end up taking him away. They still haven't said anything to me about the knife in my cell. They still haven't breathalyzed me either. By this point, and how I explained last time, Pruno starts building up. So it's like, I was already getting drunk when they were escorting me into this indoor gymnasium / medical center place. By the time I sat down and by the time I was talking to Chubbs, I was like full blown faded. I was like drunk, like head wavering. And I have my hands handcuffed behind my back, so my equilibrium's off to begin with. And I guess what happened is I end up passing out because I'm so drunk. Now, when I wake up, there's cops like kind of holding me up. And I'm kind of like coming to a little bit, and they're putting me, I'm going through some corridor that I'd never been to before. I have no idea where I am. And I'm just looking, and I'm like looking on both sides, and there's like, inmates and cells. It comes clear to me that I'm going to the hole. I don't really remember, why I was even in handcuffs to begin with. It was like I got so drunk that I almost like went through this period where I blacked out to a degree. And anybody that's been drunk or been on Xanax or been on something where you get fucked up enough where you black out knows that feeling where you kind of come to and you don't really know what's going on. Everything in retrospect, now that I'm thinking about this memory, is kind of checkered. But what ultimately happened is like I figured out that I was in the hole, and they bring me into a cell and they just uncuff me, and I go into this little tiny cell and I'm by myself. I feel like shit. So I end up just crawling on this mattress. I don't even make the bed. It's just some disgusting bare mattress. I have linen and shit, but I'm like too drunk to even make the bed. So I pass out. Wake up the next day and there's some kid in my cell. I mean, not child, but like early 20s, something like that. Some white kid I'd never seen before. And he's like, hey man, what's up? Now I'm come to and I just have this incredibly bad headache. I can barely remember what had happened the day before. I remember that Chubbs was bloody, but I don't really remember why. And then like as my memory starts coming back to me, I remember that I had drinking like 5 or 6 of these Folger things full of Pruno. And then I remember the knife, and I'm like, fuck, I'm in the hole. I have to be busted for the knife, or they breathalyzed me. I couldn't really remember what. So this kid starts talking to me, and this kid had come in on the bus with this new group of people. And he's like, hey, are you GP or SNY? And I was like, honestly, man, I don't even care either way. What are you? And he's like, well, I was GP, but I rolled it up. What prison was he at? I think he was at, might have been at Pelican Bay, I want to say. I want to say that he was at Pelican Bay. Now, Pelican Bay obviously has this like horrible reputation. When you think of it, you think of like a bunch of convicts that look like Eazy-E and like Levi, jean jackets, and they're like walking around with like daggers, like slitting CO's throats. I feel like you're in some death row music video or something. But Pelican Bay also has a support yard. So they have a level 1 yard, the same as the one that I'm trying to go to on Centinella. And I guess he was at that particular yard. And the white guys that were running, a level 1 yard is relatively soft. Problem is that once in a while you get bad apples, and even in a 1 yard. So 1 yard can be rough, just depending on where you were. And he said that at Pelican Bay, he was in a bad situation because there's bad people running that yard, bad white guys. And it wasn't a SMY GP split yard. It was just a support yard at Pelican Bay at that point. He said that he got strung out on heroin and that he ended up getting in debt pretty bad. And he didn't have the ability to pay it. So they basically asked him to have his visitor, because he was getting visits every weekend, meet up with somebody on the street, and he was supposed to bring in a bunch of meth and heroin for them. Well, the problem with that is the only person that was coming to visit him was his grandmother. And she was like, I don't know, a grandmother. She like had a perm and was like, walked with a cane and shit. She's not going to be bringing sacks of crystal meth in her vagina. Probably cobwebs in there. She's like, here's the balloon, and it has like an antique like stench to it. It smells like old comic books. The skinhead's like, yeah, all right, man, you're all right. You can stay on this yard. It's a fucking level 1 yard, but this kid is obviously like, this is probably not a good description of him, but he almost looked like Justin Bieber. He had like these like little holes in his ear where like his big gauge earrings were, and he looked like a guy that shouldn't have been in prison to begin with. And so what happened is they were trying to get him to have his grandma bring dope in, and he was from Orange County. Pelican Bay is like up like at the absolute top of the state by Oregon. So she was driving all the way up, and then, these white guys that were running the yard, they had people, I don't know, probably somewhere in LA or something. They wanted, because they didn't have anybody meeting them. Why? Because they're fucking skinheads that wear FUBU, that's why. As soon as they go to prison, their girlfriends start fucking minorities. They're like, fuck, I'm so glad I'm not with that racist piece of shit anymore. I'm gonna go fuck Tyrone now. He's like, hey, what up, baby? How's your skinhead boyfriend? He's like, fuck that dude. Fuck me while I'm bent over. Call me Murphy. Oh, I love you, Murphy. I'm sorry. I don't know where I'm going with that. But anyway, so basically it got to the situation where he had agreed to it, and he lied and told, because he didn't know what to do. It was his first time in prison. He was in prison because he was a heroin addict, and he had kind of like, inadvertently got caught up with armed robberies as like the getaway driver. He's probably some kid with like a little Honda CRX, and like, his drug dealers were like, hey, you're going to drive me around and be my little getaway car. And so like some like gnarlier guy went around doing armed robberies, and this kid just kind of gotten caught up in it. I don't know. Who knows? You never know in prison, He's probably some serial burglar, and he's probably just playing this like soft, or I don't know, I was just driving a car and they did these armed robberies. You never know what the real deal is. That's just what he was saying. There's always people like, yeah, well, I have it in for an appeal, because he'd gotten broken off pretty soon. I think he's doing like 8 years or something. It was like his first time in prison, so he's freaked out. And so he kept telling these people at Pelican Bay that his grandma was going to do it. She was going to go meet up with with their homie from LA or wherever it was. I don't remember where it was. I know he was from Orange County and she was driving up from there. But anyway, he kept stringing them along, so they kept giving him more and more heroin. Now, I get it. I mean, if you're already a heroin addict and now you're going to prison, you're in a place where it's even worse than what the conditions were like before you went to prison. So it's like really hard not to act like a dope fiend or a piece of shit in there when you're strung out and you have no means. I always had like a family to bail me out. So like, I didn't have the most authentic piece of shit experience in prison. I'd still give people the runaround. I'd still tell people stuff that wasn't true, but somehow I always finagled my way out of it because I had family or friends that would bail me out of it. This guy didn't have that. So he just kept telling these people at Pelican Bay that, you know, his grandma was going to do what they wanted. And they kept giving him dope, And then it got to a point where it was obvious that his grandma wasn't going to do shit. He hadn't even asked her about it. And he rolled it up. And now he got on a bus to come down here. So I was like, oh, so you are SNY. He's like, hey, man, I ain't no PC. I'm like, but you went out sideways over a dead at Pelican Bay. I mean, that's your PC, buddy. He's like, oh. So anyway, so he starts like telling me about what had happened with the riot, you know? And he was talking about, see, like on the bus, when you're on the way to this prison, you can't really talk that much. You know, you're not allowed to. But I guess he said that there were people, like he knew who I was already, you know, because the color tattoos, that's how people talk about me. And he said that there was some other white guy that was on the bus that knew that I was at Centinella in orientation. He went there to take me out. And, you know, he was part of like the GPs or whatever. Now, this kid, this young kid, we'll call him Clyde, right? Clyde told me that, you know, he heard them say that, like, what this guy was saying about me when they were on the bus. And basically the guy was saying that when I was at Santa Barbara County Jail, I got 11 grams of heroin fronted to me, and I never paid, which couldn't be further from the truth. Like, that's not what happened at all. I mean, you guys have heard this story a million times. You know, in actuality, what happened is I tried to get all the Bush dwellers packages, and then once they got their packages out of me, you know, they were supposed to give me the rest of the dope that I'd already paid for, and they wanted to be dope fiends, and they wanted to steal from me, and that's what happened. But of course, you know, there's going to be different people saying that it went down differently, because that's just the nature of bush dwellers, you know? There's nobody that dwells in a bush is going to, like, go around bragging about the size of the bush that he dwells in. Oh, no, dude, it's the biggest bush you could ever imagine. I gotta go lighter now, so. So, anyway, basically when he was on the bus with this guy said that he was, like, coming to this prison to take me out. Now, the guy thought that I was already on the 1 yard. He had no idea that I was stuck in orientation. So I guess the entire riot kicked off because of me, because when this guy got there, he was sitting at the table, you know, with my cellie Chubbs. Now, for as much shit as I talk about the guy, I will say this, because this is what Clyde was telling me about. Said that when they sat down at the table, you know, the Southsiders had already pretty much, like, planned to go at it with everybody that was already on that yard. Southsider. You know, like, they weren't going to take off on white guys. They were going to take off on fellow Southsiders, right? So, like, I think that they had planned to do it that night as well. You know, a lot of times Southsiders can be pretty strategic, you know. Some people don't really plan things out, and they just, as soon as they get to the yard, they'll take off on people right away. Then there's other people that have done a little more time. They're slicker convicts. They want to go kind of like on a reconnaissance mission. So basically they're prepared for the whole place to go up at breakfast. But really the purpose is just to see like what the situation is, see how many people are there, and then kind of like make a plan accordingly. So I guess nothing was going to happen that morning, you know, because the group of Southsiders that was there, like I said, was just like kind of going to that initial breakfast just to see what the numbers were and to make a plan. And what had happened is this white kid that I was in Santa Barbara County Jail with sat down with Chubbs. They all sat down at the same table. It was Chubbs, this kid Clyde that I was in the hole with, and then one of the bush dwellers, and then another bush dweller. And they started talking, and I guess this white dude, one of the bush tweaker kids, asked if I was there. You know, they're like, hey, is there a dude named Ryan Leone here? Chubbs is like, yeah. He's like, that's my cell. You know, it's like, yeah, that's my cellie. And the dude's like, what? And he just took off on Chubbs. Well, as soon as that happened, the whole fucking place just went up in flames and this whole riot cracked off. But I guess Chubbs was like trying to defend me, and he started fighting this dude, you know? And as soon as he jumped up and they started fighting, like all the other guys that had already been there kind of like defended him. So it turned into this whole thing, but it was kind of ironic that the whole thing kicked off because the dude was asking about me, and Chubbs was like, yeah, that's my cellie. And I guess the guy had said something about me, and they had started fighting. I couldn't really, the guy didn't really know exactly what had happened. You could tell that he was freaked out because he didn't know where I stood. You know, this guy, Clyde, was still kind of in denial with the fact that he was SNY. I'm like, look, bro, when you roll it up over a debt, it's over. He's like, well, is that what you did? I said, no, I didn't do anything. They just put me on this side. He's like, do you think I'm a piece of shit? I was like, for rolling it up on a debt? Yeah, but, at the same time, these guys were trying to get your grandma to, bring crystal meth in her vagina. I was like, it's not like those are the most solid citizens, It's not like I'd vote for them for mayor or whatever. He's like, oh, okay. And he was trying to come to grips, with himself. I put my hand on his shoulder. He's like, does this mean we have to have sex? I'm like, dude, no. Jesus Christ. What have you heard about being in orientation? He's like, I heard that everybody has sex. I'm like, well, you heard right, but this isn't the place for that. We need to get out of here alive. I said, now, why am I in the hole? He's like, I don't know. I said, why are you in the hole? He's like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, okay, so that kind of weirded me out, right? That was the first kind of red flag with this kid. Kind of made me start, questioning if the story that he had told me about Pelican Bay was correct to begin with. I didn't know if he was making it up. It's usually a bad sign when you ask someone why they're in the hole or why they're in jail and they say they don't want to talk about it, because it's usually for a bad reason. So I was just kind of, I'm feeling hungover. I didn't know how it worked in I'd been to the hole when I was in Wasco, but that was only because, the DA had filed a charge on me. And what ultimately happened with that charge is that they never came and picked me up. So it went away. And that probably would have cost me another year, if I had gotten charged with assault when I'd kicked that kid in the face when we were in the drunk tank together. But it just went away. So I didn't know what it was like to be in the hole when you actually are in there for something disciplinary. The reason I was in the hole at Wasco was because a new case had come up and they were trying to extradite me back to Santa Barbara County, but it never happened, so it didn't matter. But, I'm kind of suspicious of this kid. I guess that's the best way to put it. I'm suspicious of him because I don't know why he's in the hole to begin with. And I feel like shit, and I'm kind of just waiting to see what's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to come bring me paperwork. I don't know if they found a knife. I don't know if they breathalyzed me. Really, I can't remember anything, I kind of just remember fading in and out of consciousness. And now I'm kind of tripping on this kid, well, is he a plant? Am I going to go to sleep? And is he going to am I going to wake up and he's going to be fingering me or something? I don't know. I don't know if he's on some sexual fucking ninja mission or whatever. He's some fucking sex offender assassin that's in there to finger me because I'm solid or whatever. I don't know. So I'm in the hole. I go back to sleep. And, when I wake up, probably about 5 or 6 hours later, Clyde is standing over me, looking at me with his hands behind his back. I'm literally laying, and I still never made my bed either. I'm just passed out like a complete dirtbag on the mattress. I wake up with one eye and he's just standing above me with his hands behind his back, kind of looking at me. Felt like I was in The Omen or something. It was little Damien looking at me, some little devil possessed, piece of shit kid that rolled it up over a debt, supposedly. I don't even know if that's true or not. I look at him and I'm like, hey man, how long have you been watching me sleep? He's like, for a while. I was like, Jesus. Do you need anything? He's like, I'm thirsty. I don't know how to use the drinking fountain. You don't know how to press the button on the sink so that you can get water? He's like, no. I was like, now I'm really suspicious. So I kind of crawl out of bed. I'm like, all right, look, you press this button and water comes out and you drink it. He's like, oh, okay. I was like, well, are you going to drink any? He's like, no. I just wanted to know if I had an option or not. I was like, God, I got to stop coming to jail, man. Some fucking weird. I would never hang out with a kid like Clyde on the street. You know, those little gauge earrings. Could you imagine? He's like, yeah, I'm thinking about getting a bigger gauge next week. I don't know. I don't have enough money. And then Eddie, the guy that didn't have enough for the TV, is like, fuck it. Just get the gauge done and we'll just run out of the shop. There are people like that. All right, so anyway, I go back to sleep. So this is, you know, probably like a full day of me being in the hole now. And finally, it's chow time. So they come and they bring, it's just like being in the hole in the Fed. They come and they bring you food through the mail slot. They bring us a tray. And there's a cop with the porter that's feeding us. So I asked the cop, I'm like, hey man, why am I in the hole right now? And he's like, you don't know? And I was like, no. And he's just like, doesn't surprise me, Leone. And he just walks away. And I'm like, why are they like that? Why do cops always get all esoteric and like talking riddles like that and shit? Like, I could be in there for anything. I don't know what happened. I don't know if I took off on a cop all drunk. I know that when I woke up in there, I was super drunk. So I go back to sleep because, you know, I'm still hungover. I'm still dehydrated. And when you drank that heavily, I don't know how much I drank, you know, like 5 or 6 tumblers full of Pruno. I don't know what to compare that to, you know, in the free world. It felt like I drank in a few bottles of wine after not drinking for a long time. I felt horrible. I felt dehydrated. My head was pounding. I got this little weirdo potential sex offender in my cell. And because that happens sometimes too, you know, they'll bring a sex offender to orientation and then figure out that he's a sex offender and then they lock him up in the hole. You know, I'd heard that have happened before. So, you know, I'm saying that half jokingly, but honestly, I don't really know what's up with this kid one way or the other. So I'd say like another day goes by, not like a full day, but like, you know, it's breakfast now the next morning. And finally, there's a cop that I know that worked in my unit in orientation. And I was like, hey, man, why am I in here? And he's like, you're in there because you were drunk. And I said, do I have a 115, which is like a disciplinary write-up or whatever? He's like, no, you don't have a write-up. They just have you in here to clean up. I was like, okay, cool. So when am I going to get out of here? He's like, I don't know. That's not up to me. That's up to the captain. But he'll be in here. He'll be in here later today, and you can talk to him. I'm like, all right, cool. Now, this kid Clyde, like, at this point, he's just kind of, like, not talking to me anymore. He's just up in his bunk doing whatever. He's probably fingering his ass with his thumb or whatever. I'm not sure what he's doing. But I go back to sleep. So it's kind of, like, uneventful in the hole. You know, it's just me being hungover, like, passing out and waking up periodically. Finally, I wake up to the captain. You know, and the captain's like, Leone. You know, he's there to talk to me. I get up, he's like, hey man. He's like, so check it out. He's like, we know that you were drunk and we're not going to write you up for it because we have credible information that there's people that had just come on the bus, more than one person that are trying to take you out right now. You know, it's like, I know that you probably already know there was a riot and your cellie said his real name. He said he got assaulted and we have credible information that they were actually trying to get you. I already knew that because Clyde had told me that. I was like, okay. And he's like, so can we ask you something? It was him and there was like another, like some lady with him. I'm not sure who she was, like a secretary or something. And I said, yeah, what's up? He's like, hey, if we just put you on the 1 yard, are you going to be any problems for us? I said, no. You know, I wanted to get to the 1 yard really badly because they had, you know, I didn't know what to expect there. I knew that Dirty was there. I knew that I had friends over there. I heard that things cracked off there, you know, the same as orientation, but it was less frequently. And I heard that they were kind of like, you know, getting along pretty well over there. All I wanted was access to the phone all the time because I was like in the situation where I was in orientation. I got access to the phone once in a while, but, you know, I was obviously like, you know, put in a bad situation from going to the phone every time that I did it. And really every time I went to chow, there was a potential that I get in a riot. And then this new busload full of people had gotten there and, you know, they were kind of after me. So I was like, yeah, man, you know what? I'd love to go to the 1 yard. He's like, okay, we're going to send you directly there. I was like, all right, cool. You know, and so he left and I just look at Clyde. I was like, you hear that, buddy? I'm finally fucking out of here. It felt like I was getting out of jail. even though I was in the hole in this very instant. So later that night, they come and get me, and there's other people from the 1 yard, few Southsiders, there's no white guys. And they chain us together, they bring us to R&R, we have all of our belongings, and they take us like on this golf cart. They take us from the orientation yard to the 1 yard. And like the whole time, my heart's kind of pounding because I had heard that just like in orientation, when you show up to the 1 yard, a lot of times, you know, if they're wanting to get you, it's going to happen right there. And I'd heard that had happened quite a few times to different people. They bring you from orientation to the 1 yard, and then there's a group of people there, and they just smash you out right when you get there. Just depending on what direction the yard's gone in. You know, from what I had heard, there was, you know, people were getting along well. For that time being, but that could change at like any moment. So I didn't know what to expect. I just knew that I was going to get there and it could go either way. I could get to the yard and I could get jumped. I could get to the yard and they were just going to take me and I was going to be accepted into there. I had no idea what the climate was at that particular time, because it's not like we hear about it, we don't hear what's going on at that yard. I mean, we get like secondhand information that gets handed down to us, but it's kind of hard to know exactly what's going on at that yard. It's not like I was talking to Dirty on a regular basis. It's not like I got any kites from him. So I didn't really know what to expect. All I knew was that I was happy to be getting out of orientation. I was happy to be getting out of the hole. And I was in this golf cart headed over there. And I was chained with these other Southsiders, and we weren't talking to each other. I think they were just as freaked out as I was to go over there. You see the cat just kind of pop out of nowhere? So we get there, we're shackled, we have our property, and there's this huge group of guys just standing there, like, you know, basically looking at it, like kind of like giving us the evil eye. Now, what I had heard from COs is that they had a welcoming committee there. And depending on what the yard was like, if, you know, GP was running it, if SNY was running it, depending on what side they thought you were, that's when they would get you. Right when I get there, I was hoping that I would see Dirty, but I just see this group of people that I'd never seen, and they're all kind of like, you know, mad dogging us, you know, like kind of like giving us like a bad look, you know? And I'm looking at them. I hear them talking amongst themselves, but I can't hear what they're saying. And the cops are like, all right, are you guys ready? He's like, just get it out of the way. This is what the cop is telling me and the Southsiders that I'm with. We're like, you know, shackled and handcuffed. So he uncuffs us, you know, takes our shackles off. We have our property. We walk right to this group of people. And like right when I see how they're looking at us, I already know that it's going to go bad. We'll get into that in the next installment of this series, but it's definitely not going to be smooth sailing. It's not like the nightmare of this place is over. I'm just to a new section of the yard. Thank you guys for watching. If you're not on Patreon, check out patreon.com/Ryan Leone. I put up a lot of exclusive videos, interviews from my documentary, smaller cuts from there. I'm going to be putting longer cuts on there soon. And there's a bunch of different exclusive storylines. You know, it starts from $3 a month. It goes all the way up to $100 a month. There's different stuff for each tier. Appreciate you guys. Palabra.